Welcome to Black Man Lab. We are live Monday, June 28th. How's everybody this evening? Looking forward to a great conversation tonight. We are lucky and blessed tonight to have brothers from the National Association of Black Social Workers on with us this evening to get into a conversation around Black men in social work. But before we get to that, we have our traditions that we do every week. Just make us ready for this information that we're going to have and get our minds right. That's what your parents used to tell you, get your mind right, right? So that's what we want to do first, is get our minds right and be ready to take on this information tonight. So first and foremost, I am blessed tonight to be here with my brothers, Joe Barker. Joe, what's happening? My man, Jared Grant, another one of our board members, is on with us as well.
What's going on, brothers? How y'all doing tonight?
Hey, Jared. And then also sitting right to my left tonight, oddly enough, is my brother, the chairman, the founder of Black Man Lab, Ollie Davis.
Peace.
So, normally we don't have this, but we're fortunate now that both me and this guy, we both have been vaccinated, so we're good to be next to one another.
And we have a room. We have a room full of young men and young women and their coach, all the way from Rota, Spain. So they're going to be listening in and experiencing this rich conversation. So we're grateful that they have traveled from near and far, and now they're here, and they're going to tap in. So this is going to be part of a session. And just to give you all some historical context, it was a gathering like this about 16 years ago, where Ben Anderson, their coach, coached another high school boys team and brought them to Atlanta. We met at the Forever Family, Aid to Children of Imprisoned Mothers. We had a conversation with those young men, a boys to men conversation. Out of that, we developed into Let Us Make Man. And so, you never know what a meeting like this could become. So 16 years later, Let Us Make Man has been in existence, and that was really the parent organization for Black Man Lab. So it was Ben Anderson saying, hey, I'm bringing some young people. Let's get them together. You bring some adult men and help talk to them about how they navigate to be socially conscious and responsible, and at the same time being professionally successful. And here we are. So I just want to acknowledge Ben's role in calling that together, and all the brothers. Derek Bozeman was a part of that. Kene Walker, a lot of our Derek Rice, a lot of our founders, Ricky Jones, were all a part of that meeting. So here we go again, y'all. So I'll leave it to Marty, and we're going to try to get you all up on the big screen TV in here so that you can see the young men, or they can see you, and then we'll turn it around. Y'all get a chance to see them as well. All right. And Alafia, my brother, good to see you, brother Olufemi. Good to see you. It's been a minute. All right.
All right. So with that, each week we start the same way. We want to make sure that we're clear of mind and we are bringing in good thoughts and an open mind, and getting rid of any negativity to take on this information that we're going to do tonight. So first and foremost, I'm going to have my brother Joe Barker just get us centered. Joe, can you do that for us?
I can. Hopefully my internet holds up. I have my wife, also known as Mrs. Andretti, who is rushing me home and trying to get a better signal. So if I fade in and out, bear with us. But let's breathe in. 1, 2, and exhale. And let's do that one more time. Breathe in. And exhale. And I know my internet is kind of bad right now, so we're going to turn it back over to you, Marty.
You worked through it, brother. Thank you. Next up, I want to bring my brother Jared Grant on to call on the ancestors and bring them into this space, as we know that none of this work that we do could be done without those that came before us. So, Jared?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother Marty. As you all know, our ancestors are so significant and important to us. We stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. We had ancestors that built the great first and great civilizations in Africa, like Kemet, Ethiopia, and we say Ashe to them. We had those Nile Valley civilizations to the Niger, to the Congo civilizations. We give thanks to those civilizations as well. We say Ashe to that as well. We also had those who survived the Middle Passage and survived slavery, who survived colonialism. We want to thank those ancestors for simply surviving such a horrific ordeal. We give thanks to them. We give thanks to great individual ancestors. We're talking about fatherhood. You know, Hannibal had a father. Shaka had a father. You know, Heru had a father. And so we have great ancestors. Marcus Garvey had a father. We know what happened with Malcolm X's father. You know, all of these fathers who were significant, whether they lived or died before their sons grew to become the great men that they became. They were significant in their lives, one way or another. And all of the brothers on here, you have an ancestral line as well. Think about them. We want to bring them into our hearts and minds. The 10,000 ancestors that it took to create you, and why you're on this earth, and the purpose you're on this earth to do the work that you're doing. So let's think about them for about 3 seconds and place them in our hearts and minds. And on 3, we're going to say Ashe 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Ashe.
Ashe. Ashe. Ashe. Ashe. Ashe. Yo.
All right. Thank you, Brother Grant. Appreciate that. We know, again, that we can't do the work that we're doing if we don't acknowledge those that came before us. So thank you so much. Without further ado, I want to get into the conversation because, as you know, we try to stop hard at 7:45, and we want to make sure that we are keeping to that time frame. So first up, I'd like for everybody to give a quick introduction of yourself. Just tell your name and what you're doing in the space, and then we'll get into deeper questions from there. So if I could start, I'll start with Brother Muhammad. How about you?
Peace. My name is Abdul-Rahmaan Muhammad. I'm the Executive Director and founder of My People Clinical Services here in Hartford, Connecticut.
Good to meet you, brother. Thank you for being on with us. Brother Holmes.
Peace, good brothers. Good to be here with you. I work with children, youth, and families in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm the founder of Son of a Dream, agency that serves children, youth, and families here. And I'm also a proud member of NABSW Baltimore Legacy Chapter.
All right, great. Looking forward to having your conversation. Brother Montrell.
Good evening. My name is Montrell Pryor. I am a school social worker here in the Washington, D.C. area. I also work in a private practice part-time, housing and clinical services. I am also the National Association of Black Social Workers, CIC Communication Chair. And I'm also a doctoral student, or candidate now. So.
All right. Well, congratulations on that, and thanks for being on. Dr. Butler.
Hotel brother. I'm Antwan Butler. I'm the president of the Association of Black Social Workers in the Shreveport area, Shreveport, Louisiana. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and do a host of other things in my community. I'm glad to be on.
Brother Damion, how about you?
Hotel family, Damion Wilson, representing Hampton Roads ABSW as president. Serve as the national member at large for the National Association of Black Social Workers. I serve as the coordinator for school social work services in Virginia Beach City Public Schools. Very delighted to be here and lend a listening ear while y'all brothers have a candid and meaningful conversation.
Thank you, brother. And last but not least, Brother Olufemi.
All right, hold up, everyone. Edison, Okomfo Olufemi Baraka Shepsu. I'm a school social worker in the Richmond Public School System in Richmond, Virginia. I'm the chair of the Education Committee of the mighty Richmond chapter. I'm the co-chair on the national level, the Pan-African Affairs Committee, and was recently installed as a sage on the African-centered Academy for NABSW. And I'm also a priest in the Akan tradition out of Ghana, West Africa, and is using a lot of ancestor work, as we saw earlier to start the session up, as well as the whole historical paradigm to help restore our people back to their right minds. Medasa.
That is a great intro, brother. Thank you so much. And without further ado, I want to just dive into the conversation around Black men in social work. And first and foremost, what I want to do is find out what got you all into the field of social work. So since I went with you last, Brother Olufemi, could you go ahead and start us off?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I was a student at Virginia Union University, and actually I was a history and political science major as an undergrad. And I was actually headed off to law school or program in Africana studies. It took me 5 years to finish Union. I had a class in the fall and one in the spring. The spring of my 5th year, a good friend of mine was working on her MSW at the School of Social Work at VCU. And she asked me if I could get my fraternity brothers involved to come by to do a little community service project at one of the local agencies that's located in one of the housing projects less than 5 minutes from Union. Make a long story short, I went by myself because my brothers were tied up for a few weeks with other projects. There was a group of about 7, 8 young brothers, and it was dealing with male development. So I did a basic icebreaker. I went around and asked the young brothers to say who their names, where they wanted to be when they grew up. You know, of course, guys saying they want to be rappers, football players, so on and so forth. Got to the last cat, and he said that he wanted to get as many women pregnant as he possibly could. Wow. And I didn't know what to say. And another one of the little brothers in the group said, well, sir, he's serious as a heart attack because he has one on the way right now. This little brother about 15 years of age. Mm. So that really shook me up, you know. Mm-hmm. So I said, wow, I need to be here in this space with these little brothers to show them what a real Black man is all about. And if I want to be in the field of play, then I need to go and get my MSW. And that's what I did. I went to the School of Social Work at VCU, and I have not turned back. And, you know, being a school social worker, I'm on the front lines, and I have access to these little brothers every day. So, you know, being a social worker has been a blessing. And that initial meeting with that little brothers was shocking, but allowed me to make a commitment to raising and rearing Black men, to teach them how to be husbands, fathers, warriors, and nation builders.
Love that, man. Love that, and love that being a father, warrior, and nation builder. That's a big mantra for us as well, Black Men Labs. Love that, man. Thank you so much, brother. Brother Damion, how about yourself? What got you into the work?
Well, I kind of follow a similar path, but with me, I grew up in Hampton, Virginia. I'm very close-knit community, pretty much the type of community where you did something on the first street. By the time you got home, you got reprimanded like 3 or 4 times before you get to your parents, and then your parents, you know, wail on you after your neighbors don't wail on you. I'm very close-knit community. We looked after one another. We held each other down. We had like many fathers in the community, my father included. So basically, you know, you pick yourself up by your bootstraps and, you know, we lift you up. So just a very close-knit community. What attracted me to social work, honestly, was just looking at, you know, who had what and who didn't have. Where I grew up was more so insulated, but if you walk pretty much no more than 2 minutes, your journey can change in a heartbeat. It was some housing projects there. It was just some pockets of poverty. It was just some pockets where, you know, you had a lot of things going on that could surely change your journey. And, you know, to some extent, you know, going up insulated. So my original goal with getting into social work was to really look at poverty and how to ameliorate poverty, you know, what's the cause of it. And then, you know, getting into things that, you know, so far as race and, you know, class and all those other isms that, you know, we learn in these schools of social work is really, you know, brought me to the forefront. So like Brother Olufemi, I thought that one of the things that I could do to really impact the lives of particularly, you know, Black men in particular was working in the school system. So I did go to Norfolk State University, HBCU, went there, got my foundation right there at Norfolk State. Then I also did matriculate to Virginia Commonwealth University. And there, you know, I did get my certificate in school social work. Went into Virginia Beach City Public Schools, which is way different than Richmond Public Schools. Virginia Beach is a more conservative city. A lot of the ideology is very, very, very different than from a Richmond, a Newport News, a Hampton. And I'm looking at Brother Muhammad on here, probably definitely a Hartford and Philly and the other city. So very much a way, way different foundation. So you kind of had to move different. But nevertheless, I was tasked at working at one of the few majority African-American schools in the district, Title I school, single-parent homes. A lot of the young boys in that school did not have African-American males. I was the only African-American male, period, in the building besides Mr. Boone, who was the custodian. I was the only one who actually go in with a shirt and tie. And that was pretty much for 5 or 6 years in that particular school. So they had no other model, those young Black boys in that school. So I did start a group. We did things so far as teaching kids how to tie a tie. We taught the things about how to talk to people, how to talk to women. We had these candid conversations such as we're having now. And just to wrap it up, one of the young men I remember, we were talking about how do you treat a woman. And this young gentleman who was our 4th grader at the time says, you talk to women by beating them. So we said, where'd you learn that from? He said, my granddaddy. That's how you talk to women, that you beat them. So just to try to, you know, change that young man's trajectory into something different so then he can have a productive life is what I initially got into social work for, along with, you know, trying to ameliorate, you know, tenets of poverty. So that's pretty much been my journey in social work, civil rights, also my parents and that foundation and that very same community that raised me is what, you know, brings me to the table just as a social worker and as an activist and as a change agent.
Man, that's strong though. The young fella, his point of view, and there's so many of our young people out there that have, you know, for lack of a better term, a distorted point of view on what life is supposed to look like. And unless there's some folks like yourselves that are there in the picture, it's going to be very hard for them to see what, you know, a good role model, a good look looks like. You know, so that's great on your part. Thank you for doing that work, brother. Dr. Butler, how about yourself? What got you into it?
Yes, sir. I'm originally from Tampa, Florida, and my background was a little rough. I actually grew up homeless most of my childhood. Both of my parents were heroin addicts. I lived on the streets most of my life as a kid. Slept on park benches. I actually slept on a park bench about 400 feet from my biological father, who didn't want me, and sold drugs with my biological mother. Dropped out of school in middle school, and then got involved in the foster care system. And basketball was my outlet, so that was what I did when I wasn't doing when I was doing what I wasn't supposed to do. And fortunately, I met an individual. Actually, he's a lawyer in Dallas now. His name is Moses Cage III. He took me in and kind of taught me some things that he knew about a man to be a man. Actually, he was 1 year older than me. I had a fortunate opportunity to walk on to a community college basketball team, and he was on the team. He was from New Orleans, and he kind of modeled his life for me, and I gained some interest in actually living because I spent a lot of my childhood and teenage years in suicidal fits. And I had a another fortunate opportunity to go to a university in Missouri, and they gave me a basketball scholarship. And to be honest, I picked the vocation and the classes that were the easiest to maintain my scholarship. That happened to be sociology. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in sociology, and I realized that I couldn't do anything with a bachelor's degree in sociology. I began to ask my teammates and my coach what I could do with my life after that, because I wasn't sure. And my friends told me, man, you're a pretty sociable guy. You like helping people. Have you ever thought about going into social work? I had a teammate who was from Homer, Louisiana, who was planning to go into the social work program as well. And so I called around to different schools trying to see if I could get in the social work program, but my grades were so poor, nobody would take me. Fortunately, I called Grambling State University and met a young lady by the name of Della Wills, who ended up actually being my clinical supervisor. Took me in with academic probation. And she said, we're going to let you in. Nobody's going to let you in, but if you make 1C, we're going to kick you out of the program. I said, yes, ma'am. I got to Grambling State University. It was the first time that I've ever been in touch with my African heritage. I grew up in Tampa. It was a mixed population of individuals. Nobody taught us anything about Black history outside of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Grambling State University wrapped its arms around me, and I met a lot of professors, a lot of people there, and my passion for social work exploded on that campus. It was the first time I've ever took education serious, the first time I ever took helping people serious. I've always had that inclination in my heart. Left there, Grambling State University, found out I had an absolute love for clinical mental health. And I love working with Black men and Black boys. That's what I've been doing the last 13 years. Have an organization in the city that I'm in where I meet with men monthly, and I specifically ask for the fellows who have mental health challenges, because I have an affinity for that because of my own past and my background. So I've been doing clinical mental health since 2005, and looking for young men, looking for young boys who are struggling with those issues, and so I can be able to impart some things into them and be able to help them, whether they're getting ready to get married, going into school, whatever their issues are. So that's how I got my passion for social work, and I think social work kind of found me. I didn't find it, but I absolutely wouldn't trade it for anything else in the world, and wouldn't trade Grambling State University for no other university in the world. It was the only school that ever gave me a chance. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Man, that is a story of victory, brother. On so many levels. First and foremost, you know, what you've gone through in your life and where you are today is you know, nothing more than inspiring. So congratulations on that, but more importantly, congratulations on the work that you're doing, and specifically doing for those that you know have gone through similar things that you went through, man. That's huge. And I'm going to tell you, man, with the Black Man Lab now, when we plan on getting back together in person in July. Normally when we were meeting in person, we would have over 250 Black men in the space together. And you, across the board, you know, we had people from all different socioeconomical backgrounds, all kinds of things, ages from 5 to 85, 5-year-olds to 85-year-olds, Black men, all in the same room, man. And we were always looking for somebody that can help with, you know, some challenges that we may be having from a psychosocial standpoint, man. So we're going to keep you on the speed dial. I'm just telling you that right now, man.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
And we're going to want all of y'all, I'm going to say it again toward the end of this, but one of the things that I task everybody with that comes on as a panelist for the Black Man Lab is that when we are in live and in person, you have to make it a point to get down to Atlanta to be at one of our sessions so you can understand the power of the Black Man Lab and what that room feels like. Because we call it a safe and sacred space for Black men. And there's not very many of those, as you all know, for us in these United States, yet to be United States. So I'll get to preaching. I don't want to do that. Brother Montrell, How about you? What got you to where you are, brother?
My story, it seems a little bit of like everybody's, honestly. For the most part, I always tell people social work found me. I was not looking into social work whatsoever. I was actually on the path of law school myself until, I kept running into some bumps in the road. So I kept asking myself, well, what is it that I truly like to do? And am I truly like interested in going to law school? Well, needless to say, I took a social work class because I had always had, a social worker growing up for the most part in and out of my life at certain points when I started to get older because both my parents ended up falling into addiction as well. And so found myself throughout high school being tossed to and fro from other family members, and then also trying to deal with the trauma of that. I didn't know how to process it. So I found myself oftentimes getting kicked out of the house because I was lashing out when really I was angry at the fact that my parents who were once there were not there anymore, especially during that pivotal time of my life. So needless to say, I knew what a social worker was. And going into college, first generation, I had no clue what I was getting myself into. All I knew was that I was being rebellious at home and I did not want to attend Tennessee State University, which was a major, major, major upset. Now that I look back on it, I probably should have went to HBC, but I didn't. But I ended up getting into college and I took a variety of classes, didn't know what I wanted to do. My first semester of college, I failed. I got a second opportunity the second time once I kind of realized like, hey, like it's either this or you go back home to nothing. And so, again, I always had social work in the back of my mind and I just took a class and fell in love with it. Right after graduating with my BSW, I got into foster care social work, rural foster care social work. I attended Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green, Kentucky. The city is only known for creating the Corvette. And so, so I was very much into rural social work at the time. And it pretty much burnt me out. I did it for almost 2 years. And so I tried to figure out in between time, because at the time I had aspirations of going to law school. That didn't work out. So I was like, well, you know what? Let me go ahead and see if I can get my MSW. I know I can complete the advanced standing program. I got into the program, did fairly well, but still knew that I did not want to do, at the time I kept saying I didn't want to do traditional social work. So I didn't want to do case management. I didn't want to do, foster care because I felt like I had so many other skills to offer besides that. And so I ended up taking a break for social work for a while, up until this year, actually. I actually went into teaching. So I became a special education teacher through Teach for America, got placed all the way in Las Vegas and stayed out there for 3 years. I even helped found a school there. And so through my experience being a special education teacher, I started noticing so many Black young males being thrown into special education. And so with that, it just used to shock me that, teaching these little boys, the curriculum, I'm like, I don't think you should really be in special education. And then going over their assessments and then building that rapport with them, I started to figure out the missing link was that they had unaddressed trauma that was impacting their academics. And because schools weren't equipped to address that trauma, they kept getting funneled into special education. And as we all know, special education and the school to prison pipeline are definitely interconnected. And so when I moved to DC about 3 years ago, still continued in special education, but I started to find myself getting burnt out again. And so in the back of my mind, I was like, well, I have my master's in special education, but I still have my master's in social work. However, I dreaded taking the actual licensure exam until I got into a predicament where it was kind of like, okay, I needed something to fall back on. Needless to say, studied for the exam for like 2 weeks, passed it on the first go round. I was like, yay, my options have now opened up. So I ended up staying at the same school that I moved to DC to teach at, and became one of the only few social workers I know in DC that's dually certified as a special education teacher and a clinician. And so through my experience, even within my doctoral program, my research and everything has kind of been intertwined in helping young Black boys, for the most part, who are experiencing trauma, but when they get to school, which for the most part, school is the only safe place that a lot of them have. However, because of the requirements in school and coupled with the trauma that they're already experiencing, it makes it hard for them to really focus on the curriculum at hand. And so what you find is that students are starting, well, Black boys for the most part, are starting to fall behind in school because nobody is really doing the work that's needed to address their social and emotional health and their mental health. And so I've kind of dedicated my life and work to that. That's just kind of been my vein for the most part. And so outside of that, I work in a private practice as well. And all of my clients are Black males. I never advertised it that way. They just so happen to find me. So everybody from 13 up, Black cis hetero men, Black trans men, they just find me. And so from that, I've kind of dedicated my life to, unapologetically serving us. And with all of that too, I ended up starting a podcast as soon as the pandemic started as well, called the Dear Black Boy Podcast, the therapeutic podcast for Black men, which is also available on all podcast platforms. So shameless plug, but that's how I got into the field.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, man. And I'm going to ask you in the chat of the Zoom for us, will you put any information that all of you have for any organizations outside of this organization? Feel free to put it in there, or any links that you want to put in there, and then we'll put it on our website as well. So if you could do that. Who's up? Brother Muhammad, how about you?
Oh, yes, definitely. Long story short, when I was 16 years old, I was with my father at his job. He worked at an agency in New York City called Lakeside. And young people were coming up to him, thanking him for whatever, different things. They were like a magnet to him. And it had a tremendous impact on me that day, seeing him at his job. A lot of times you don't really know what your parents do. But one of the things I knew is that the young people he was helping, they really loved him and respected him. And I really liked what I saw. I went to film school out of high school, but I wasn't very good at it. And when I dropped out of film school, I decided that I would just follow the path like my father. My father was a social worker, and I just said, okay, whatever he did, he turned out okay. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. So I went to Tougaloo College, where he went to for college, and got my bachelor's degree. And then I got my master's degree at Clark Atlanta University. And, like I said, I just pretty much wanted to be like my father, make an impact in our community here in Hartford, and be able to help our people succeed.
Awesome. That's great stuff. And we got a lot of HBCU love on here. I love that, man. Love that. Brother Holmes, how about you? Last but not least.
Yes, sir. For me, my journey was a little weird. I work with youth off and on in different capacities, treatment center or, schools. But I primarily was doing media. I was passionate about telling the stories of our community. So, I wrote for the Baltimore Afro, historically Black newspaper here in Baltimore. I wrote for the Baltimore Times, and I was just really focused on telling the stories of our community. And that allowed me to get a bird's eye view, really, of the issues and the challenges, just looking back from afar. And I'm able to, I think, a lot of times, in school we taught micro and meso and macro and all that good stuff. But I think macro, looking at the larger picture and what are the implications of it, not just looking at the what, the child is acting up, whatever, but, going to what Montrell said of, okay, we have a school system that systemically processing our boys through special ed again and again and again. And, that narrative is similar to Baltimore. That narrative was happening in Baltimore, and Montrell mentioned Las Vegas. So we see it's a national issue where Black boys are slapped with ADHD labels and therefore often dismissed and fall through the cracks in the school system. So, these are the type of issues that I was covering, being a producer on public radio and other platforms. And, at the same time, I was working as a paraprofessional, working with boys and families in Baltimore. And that's where I fell in love doing that work because I was able to, like I said, go into the homes of these boys and his families and sit at the kitchen table and find out the why. Folks focus on the what, or he acting out in school, he pushed somebody, or he threw a chair or whatever, but really to go inside these homes and see what's really happening, what's impacting the life of this young man, going to what Montrell said, the trauma, they showing up and they so-called angry or whatever, but we're not understanding, taking the time out to see why. So I had the opportunity to hold space and do that and work with these young brothers. And that really was the work that made me, being at that kitchen table and being out in the community, connecting with other brothers who are doing similar work and supported me as I support these young brothers. And that's where I fell in love. And I said, you know what, I'm ready to go to school and do this on another level, expand the work that I'm doing. So I went to the great Morgan State, another HBCU, just like my fellow HBCU brothers on the phone, on a call here, and got my master's degree in social work and continued on there. I mean, it was a kind of an eye opener. I mean, it was weird being in that process because, some of the stuff they were talking about, community organized, being involved, and the stuff they were describing, I never looked at as social work, but little did I know I was doing it the entire time. I was involved in grassroots movements to address violence in our city. I was being involved building relationships with brothers and sisters in the community that were doing all types of work to better the community. But I didn't know until I was sitting in classroom like, oh yeah, this is social work. So with that, it became easy for me. Because I was already doing it. It's just that folks provided me that good old piece of paper that opened up some doors to me. But the work never changed. Really, it was, I saw that how problematic the profession was itself, and how the profession, just being honest, at times was a disservice to Black children, youth, and families. So it was, so deprogramming and reprogramming on my part on how I'm going to show up as a social worker and serving Black folks.
Man, that's really great feedback there. And then when you said something there that really touched me that I think is important, especially as we look at this work that you guys are doing, is the why piece, right? In that you all, having had the experiences that you all have had as Black men, would look at the why a little bit differently than other folks, right? Why you'd be a little bit more concerned with, why a young man behaves the way that he does, and dig a little deeper than somebody just putting a label on them and saying, oh, this is what he is because this is what all of them are, and then moving on, right? And I think that's phenomenal work, and I'm sure that's what all of you all are doing. So I'll dig deeper into that as well. But Joe, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I did, man. First and foremost, brothers, thank you for being with us tonight. Sorry about my technical difficulties getting in. I was just getting off the road, but I heard the vast majority of your introductions. And as we talked offline before even this evening, you guys are amazing. You brothers are amazing. And thank you. Let me as a father of 3 sons that are in college, let me say thank you. Because what my sons didn't have is you guys at their high schools. You know what they had. They had the white female counselor, okay? And consistently derailed, consistently. And so I was just that father that had to stay and basically do her job for my sons, recognizing they didn't have you. So thank you for being that to these young brothers out here. I wanted to talk about something that Brother Holmes just said, man. And again, I missed some of it. Some of you may have touched on it already, but he segued right into it. I had my notes and I was like, that's what I want to talk about. The ADHD and ADD labeling, which is my oldest son, that's what derailed him. And to this day, as a 23-year-old young man, he's still struggling because how he was treated in high school. I want you all to unpack that a little bit more for our families, for our moms or dads that might be listening, with respect to just your guidance, your thoughts. I don't want to necessarily dispel the myth because, you know, there may be some validity or not. I don't know. I know with my son, it wasn't. And he was completely derailed. But I want you all to kind of talk about that to help parents understand, hey, here's some legitimate things that you can look at, or here's what you can do to advocate for your child or recognize some things. And I ask that because in this space, we really want to educate these parents with these children that may have those issues, or even some of the youth that we mentor. So I'll kick it back to Brother Holmes, just because that's the first person I heard mention it. But any of you guys, please, what can you tell our parents about that labeling and how they can manage it?
Well, you know, first and foremost, I want to be clear that a diagnosis is not the sum of who you are, point blank and period. And we get into a lot of trouble and we derail lives, to use your words, Brother Barker. We derail lives when we place that label on folks. Don't fully educate on what the diagnosis is, and how it may or may not impact the child's life. I think that, you know, it's so much to say about it, but I need to say that we need to look at every child, particularly Black children holistically, and not based on their behavior in the classroom. Because I've literally seen Black boys behave one way in the classroom, and I took them outside at the library, and I got something totally different. I was able to make them, you know, get them to do that work in the library, and they were motivated and engaged to do so. I was also able to engage them in activities in the community. So I think we always need to be very careful, and more education needs to be done. You know, more education as clinicians, as professionals, as social workers, and educating parents. It's not the sum of our Black boys and our Black children in general. It's not. It's you know, I'm trying to say too much not to get myself in. Well, let me say what it is. It's a diagnosis so you can bill for third-party billing. It's a diagnosis that I'm telling the truth what it is, that you can bill for, that you can get paid as a psychotherapist. You know, one of the things I do, you can bill for that diagnosis based on certain behaviors. Folks can argue the validity of it, and a lot of arguments are valid.
Okay.
But I just want to say, without getting too much into the weeds of that, because there's a lot of political dynamics. And let's be very clear when we're having this conversation, that Black pain and suffering is profitable. We have to be very clear about it. I'm in Baltimore City, where we have Johns Hopkins University, University of Maryland. We have the largest medical institutions, healthcare institutions, outpatient mental health clinics throughout the city. Black pain and suffering is big business. We got shock traumas here. But trauma is big business, so much so we got programs where you can learn trauma as a clinician, and you pay your little $1,500 and you can get your certificate saying, hey, I learned trauma. Why? Because it's business. And that's what has happened. And oftentimes, just being honest, in the mental health sector, we are not about healing, we're about managing. Why? Because healing ain't no money in healing.
Right, right.
It's money in managing the problem. So if I can slap a diagnosis on you and keep you coming back, and mama, she just trying to figure out what to do and doing the best she can, then oftentimes so be it. And that way, Black people, Black families, Black children are oftentimes exploited off of their own pain and suffering. And we created $1 billion business off of doing so.
Well, let me ask about that. That's specifically what I want to ask about. So Black mom comes home, brother Holmes, brother Olufemi. Black mom comes home, says, this is what was said. I don't know what to do. What do you tell her?
Well, education. Like I said, education on what is and what isn't. And I'm cautious.
Find that out? I want to give them
to be clear. And to be clear, I'm cautious with that diagnosis because it's thrown around too much. So I'm cautious with that diagnosis. So I try to educate parents on what it is and what it isn't. That does not mean the gloom and doom, because a lot of challenges from my perspective and what I see in my life, they really are developmental. These are challenges. Well, he acting out, he not cleaning his room, he not taking the trash out. Yeah, he's acting like a 13-year-old. We cannot expect a 13-year-old to behave like a 23-year-old man or a 33-year-old man. He doesn't understand responsibility yet. He has to be taught responsibility like all of us. This is socialized behavior. If you want him to take out the trash, if you want him to come in the house on time for his curfew, this is behavior that needs to be taught and modeled for him. It does not mean, well, you have this diagnosis, something wrong with him and he cannot function. So I believe a lot of miseducation and misinformation is out there about what this diagnosis does. So I would say for any social worker and clinician, taking the time out to educate that parent. And also when you're doing your approach and you're engaged in this family, look at them holistically, not as a problem that, well, he has ADHD, so, he can't function like, that's nonsense. That's nonsense and that's dismissive. And that tears apart any child when you look at it, the sum of their bad day because they act out, probably because the teacher said something that hurt their feelings. So in their 12-year-old, 13-year-old mind, they responded with anger first. They didn't know how to say, well, I felt embarrassed because you asked me a question and I didn't know and you put me on the spot in front of my homeboys. No, they're not going to articulate like that. They're going to articulate with going off and going back and forth with a teacher.
Let me do this because I understand what you're saying. I want to give somebody else an opportunity because
right. My fault, brother.
No, you're good, man. Because that's what I need my parents to hear. If anybody else wanted to answer that before we get into the next question, because as Marty's going to say here very soon, we pushed on the clock because this is some important conversations. But if there's somebody else that wanted to say that, so education.
Well, let me just say this, and I just want to be brief. I don't want to so everybody get a chance to talk. But while we're having the conversation, about diagnoses, I just want to add another layer onto the DSM and these different psychiatric diagnostic models. The failure of the system is us of not diagnosing white supremacy and domination. Okay, that's the number one diagnosis that we don't talk about.
Wait, say it again.
That medical model, then we're looking at the individual, and then we're not even taking account of ancestral issues, the jacked up political prison system, our communities being kept poor by redlining, all these different things that are going on with us, and our families are just trying to survive. The crack cocaine epidemic back in the 80s, which is we haven't really come up with the solution of dealing with those traumas from the crack cocaine piece, the intergenerational wounds from enslavement, So our people are dealing with a whole host of issues. And when we're talking to our families, we're talking to our children, we got to be able to now start allowing them to be able to look at our history and all the different chapters that we've had to deal with to figure out why we're thinking how we're thinking. Okay, but how does a black man process under oppression? We're looking at the black man and behavior under white supremacy and domination. Okay, the microaggressions, the macroaggressions, the mesoaggressions that happen to us daily here in America, as well as throughout the entire diaspora. And until we are having these conversations, then we're going to continue to blame ourselves or look at that particular child or that adult that's having the issue. No, we got to look at the system. The system, we can't blame our people for anything they do under the 400-some plus years of oppression.
I completely agree. Completely. So I think what I hear you, brother, saying, which is so powerful, is the education. Regardless of whether we're learning about what the diagnosis means or the systemic oppression of what the racist creation that the system's doing exactly what it was created to do. We know that. And so I think education is what I want my moms and dads that are listening to listen to. We're going to make sure we put your information out there, because this is a panel I would want them calling. You're the brothers I would want them to call. You're the guys I would have wanted my baby mama to call y'all instead of the white counselor at the school to tell us what needs to happen. You know, that's what we need. Switching over to my next question, speaking of the white counselors, you know, I see a strong organization of black social workers here and male black social workers, even more importantly. How do we combat, though, in education, which when I went into it, I was overwhelmed to see the 85% white female presence in education that are impacting our young men, our young black men. They don't know how to teach our sons. They don't know what to do with them. You, Brother Holmes, you took a young man outside immediately, were in space with him where he's listening, he's engaging and so forth. So I'm gonna flip over to Brother Damion and Brother Butler and Brother Montrell and Brother Muhammad. How do we combat that as well? Do we get more social workers? Do we get in this space where they are so that we can help counter what they're doing? What do we do?
And I think that.
Go ahead, Brother Pryor. I give it to you.
So, I mean, I come from, of course, being a former teacher and social worker, so I completely understand this question. Back to what Brother Olufemi was saying, it's a system. It's a system thing. And so it's hard to recruit black male teachers. It's hard to recruit black male social workers and counselors because the system, for one, doesn't want to simply pay what we're worth, because we bring a lot to the table. And so that's rooted in, you know, systemic oppression in itself. And then part of it is too, the profession, any profession within education, I feel like is not marketed for us. It's always like white women are always the face of counseling. They're always the face of education. And so until we could change the language and change the face, we're always going to find ourselves having difficulty recruiting us within those professions. I'm currently at a school right now, and I'm the only black male social worker we've ever had. And so, of course, I get all the black boys. Of course, they ask me to go beyond, you know, what I'm expected to do, because I'm one of the very few that's there that, you know, can provide the support that's needed. I think a huge part of it is the educational piece of it. And so what that looks like is, unfortunately, us having to do some of the hard work and provide that diversity and equity training, which, you know, I'll be honest, I have my personal opinions about that, but if we don't do it, who else will? And so after providing that training, we also have to establish a system or establish some type of program where there is accountability in play. Too many times what happens is we have these trainings, but nobody is holding the people who receive the training accountable. So what happens is we find ourselves every year back at square one, having to retrain and unlearn and retrain, where we also don't hold the people accountable for the training that they receive and putting it into practice. And so what happens is we have this vicious cycle of just same old, same old, same old. And so until, you know, really there's accountability, and until that system folds, we're going to always find ourselves in that vicious cycle.
Fair enough. Brother Damion, I see you saying something.
Yeah, I would echo that. Brother Pryor stated a lot of things I would wanted to say, but that key word is equity. That's been thrown around so much in schools of education and educational systems, but what does that actually mean? And I think when we're talking about education and how do we recruit, retain more African Americans, period, particularly Black males in education and social work, you have to really look at it for this foundation. When I look at these schools of education, schools of social work, what are we teaching? Are we teaching cultural-based competencies? Are we teaching the developmental psychology of the Black child by Dr. Amos Wilson? Are we teaching the awakening of the Black genius by Dr. Amos Wilson? Are we teaching the destruction of African civilization by Dr. Chancellor Williams? Are we teaching those books? Are we getting that foundation? If we're not getting that foundation and that cultural competency, then how can you teach? And it's just not black and white, brothers. You have people that look like us in the same skin that do not have a cultural foundation, a culture-based competency, and are teaching our kids, but really are miseducating them. And they're miseducating them. They're taking them to the back door. They're setting them up. Bottom line, they're setting them up. Bottom line, and we have to change that. We have to invest in these schools. First of all, let's take it to our HBCUs. Back with my mother and her mother before that, to be a teacher, that was the most honorable thing that you could do. That was more honorable than being a lawyer, being a doctor. That was like, it was like being a grid. I mean, pretty much. But now over time, it's become devalued. People complain about the pay. And I know from just a personal standpoint, a lot of, my friends, they didn't want to go into social work. They were more geared toward working, the vocational, getting that money right then and there. I mean, I live in Hampton Roads area. I know some of y'all familiar with the shipyards. The shipyards ain't never going to die here. You can go work at the shipyard, make $30 an hour, coming out of high school, and be all right. And you don't have to go get that formal education. So, I mean, just that quick money, just the access, and what's being glamorized as being more sexy, being more flavorful. Social work and teaching kind of gets, minimized, but there's good work to do here. And I think it's just about market promoting it. And we're talking about, traditions of values and sacrifice. And, I think, Brother Mike Gwynn, he's not on this, but he did a quote, I think it's by Shirley Chisholm, that, service is the rent that we pay for our service to live on this earth. And, I look at it from just that aspect. So it's just about going to these schools of social work, these schools of education, and broadening the scope when it comes to just cultural identity and just that cultural-based capacity that's needed. Because when you are teaching these children, when you are working with these children, you've got to have a sense and understanding of the foundation they come from. We want to talk about why we get overdiagnosed with ADHD. Is it really ADHD? Maybe it's trauma. Maybe it's racism. Maybe it's some other impact. Do we, overdiagnose? Did we ever think about doing that? Did we ever think about looking what's happening in this young man, this young woman's life for them to exhibit and sometimes manifest those behaviors? All of those things, brothers, are, things that we really need to look at. So I think that we need to go into these schools, have a re-education. You see a push now with this word we call equity and diversity and all these other isms they want to throw out. What people are gearing toward is basically, we have to educate, Black and brown children, and we have to have an understanding of cultural competency. But a lot of times what the problem is that these same teachers, these same instructors, that accountability piece that Brother Pryor has talked about, don't have a clue. They don't have an awareness. And if you don't have that awareness, if you don't have that foundation, then what you are pretty much teaching, is going to be futile. So we need to have those conversations. And we need to have people in power to make the change and have those candid, meaningful conversations and be in those positions to make the changes that you and I need.
So Dr. Butler, let me ask you this, because we've heard, we know what needs to be done. So tell us a little bit about what is what is NABSW doing to facilitate that change? What are you guys doing? Because everybody has said the right things that need to happen, and all you guys are in that space. So yeah, Brother Muhammad, I want to hear from you as well. So Dr. Butler and Brother Muhammad, what is NABSW doing to push and promote and increase that space?
Yeah, so I want to piggyback off of something that you mentioned earlier and really start on the local level as far as our organization is concerned. I think we have a social responsibility, cultural responsibility. When you graduate, you get your degree in social work and you get into your job or whatever, your field, your clinical practice, I think we have a responsibility to help our universities find other social workers. I don't think there's been a year that's gone by that I haven't encouraged somebody to go to Grambling State University and go get their social work degree. There's been people who say, I'm going to be counselors. I don't know what I'm going to do. We've sat down and had candid conversations. I was impacted by a conversation a few years ago. It's changed my life. It was by Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was taking over his corporation, and he needed this individual to come work with him. This guy was working at Coca-Cola at the time. And he said, I want you to come work with me. That guy said, well, why in the world would I come work with you? I'm already making a 7-figure income. And then he said to the guy, he said, well, do you want to make sugar water the rest of your life, or do you want to come change the world? We got so much to offer in the field of social work, but I think we minimize our presence. I think we minimize our vocation. So one, we have a responsibility to these Black males that we sit down having conversations with to point them in the direction of social work. We have a valuable field that's almost higher than the office of the president, right? And then two, and our organization pushes that, and we believe in that, right? And then two, I want to speak to really quickly about the school system, because I think every organization, every community, you got to have some influence and impact in your school system.
Okay.
You're not doing anything in your school system, you're not doing anything, right? So one, I don't think we'll ever, I don't think where we are now, we can outnumber. We know that we have mostly white female teachers teaching our kids, right? They're not culturally responsive, nor culturally sensitive to what's going on with our kids' needs. We might not outnumber them, but we can outthink them. We can be creative in the structure that we're given. I give you a prime example of that. So I was in the school for a year, and I was working, and I saw the institutionalized racism and what they were setting our young boys up for, right? So I said, okay, I want you to give me all the kids who've been suspended in the last 3 months. Just so happened all the kids that suspended the last 3 months were Black boys. Of course. Started a program right in the school called Gents, where they give those kids to me during their recess time, and I shape and mold their behavior while they're in the school system, right in their school, right in their structure, right? We got to outthink and out-strategize them. And from an organization standpoint, we funnel our resources, our talents, our politics in that direction. I think when we see young boys see our visibility against the odds, against oppression, and against obstinates, and we still rise, we gain the interest and the influence of those young men, and then they begin to question the system that they're in, and then we start helping to open their eyes and illuminate them to what's going on, right? And then we can do that in the homes as well. We can do that from the organizational standpoint, and I think that's why we exist. But I don't think we should lose that focus because we're outnumbered. I don't think we should lose that focus because we know the opposition that's up against us. We just get creative and strategic. Listen, we the only people to generate a renaissance 100 years after slavery. You know, we just get creative around this thing. And if we get one of those kids to start thinking differently, and then I teach him how to teach another kid how to think differently, right? And then keep him connected to our organization and the people in our organization, because we are the community. I think change starts happening there. We start seeing it. Might be slowly, but it's surely we start seeing it.
Appreciate that.
Let me jump in real quick, Joe. I just want to say on that note, that's exactly what the lab is about. Black Man Lab is about, is that, you know, we have the creativity and the innovation to do whatever, right? And in what you were just talking about there, Dr. Butler, you know, oppression has been there. We've always risen, right? We're having this conversation, right now, tonight, because we've always risen, right? So the key, I think, for us is being able to make sure that our young Black boys specifically can see guys like you all. Right. And unfortunately, our school systems and the system in general, like you were talking about, Brother Olufemi, the system is rooted in white supremacy. So, you know, we have to be able to figure out a way. And I think that that's one of the things that Joe was trying to get to. What's the way that we figure out to coalesce our resources better so that our young black boys and girls see us in a different light as it relates to social work and being socially conscious? Because at the end of the day, that's really what this boils down to, is being socially conscious, right? So what do you all think is the way that we do that? What do you think, Brother Olufemi? I'll start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is looking at inside of your school settings is just being your authentic self, you know, as a Black man, and which means that you have to come out of that so-called title of a social worker, and you may have to be a father to some, you may have to be a cousin to some, an uncle to some, and just be that brother that's there just to listen to them, because these kids are just dealing with so much stuff. And as Montrell and everybody else was saying, the training of the teachers is steeped in a different pedagogy that's not going to allow them to be authentic, or they're authentic. Them being authentic is being system-wise. So each brother here, from what I'm hearing, is putting their authentic self out there in their various communities, and then we're able to get one brother one at a time, build them up, and then what happens, and all the brothers on here can tell you, once the brothers inside this setting see that you care about them, I don't care if they're the toughest thug, you know, in the so-called building or whatever else, they're going to break bread with you. Mm-hmm. That's just the bottom line when they see you. And children are a good judge of character. They can judge character sometimes a little bit better than adults can. They know if you're real or if you fake, you know. And when we're in that situation, you know, it's our obligation as men to be there unconditionally for those young brothers. And when we set that example inside the school division, with inside of our local chapters, and we're pushing that type of program forth in our various localities, then we go one by one, as Dr. Butler was saying, one by one. And the last thing, sometimes it's good to start off with small numbers, okay? There's nothing wrong with being small. But then 3-4 years later, 5 years later, 7 years later, you start to see this thing starting to grow exponentially. So that's what it's all about, relationship building and being there unconditionally for those little brothers. And as a matter of fact, the last thing I'll say, you know, I don't even use the word client. You know, I threw that out the door a long time ago. That's my family. Mm. That's my little brother, my little sister.
Mm. Can I add something real quick? Real quick. That concept, Brother Olufemi, that concept is like takes a village to raise a child. That's like the concept that's the type of community I grew up in. That's the type of community where you have many fathers. And I think, you know, when we go into these schools, having just one of us in that school can change the trajectory of many of these young men. And just to make it a broader concept, you know, in Norfolk, Virginia, at a Bowling Park Elementary School, this was almost 30, 40 years ago. This is basically a principal, Dr. Herman Clark. He's retired now. He was a principal. He used a Comer model based off of James P. Comer, African-American psychiatrist out of Yale. Basically used a Comer model when he used the education at Bowling Park Elementary School, 100% Title I, and highly impoverished school in the housing project. And he used that Comer model, and he changed that school around, that they had the highest test scores in the city. They had the highest test scores in the city, higher than the elite schools in Norfolk. So much that the superintendent at the time didn't believe that these poor black kids could outscore them white kids, that he made them take the test again, and they ended up scoring higher in the test the second time than they did the first time. That is community change. Better use the Coma model. And because he did that, his rewards that they moved him out of the school and into a higher position, but the school went back to its old strategy ways. They had that community. Wow. He was using that model. He had the parents involved, that parent participation, because you know what they say about black parents. They don't have no strong work orientation. They don't have no strong academic achievement orientation. And that model that he used was actually utilized to involve the parents and engage the parent. And that school, for a 3-4 year period, had the highest test scores in the city. And when they took him out of the school, it went back and reverted back to some of the same habits. So that's just an example of, as a village, raising a child, as men, you know, taking on their responsibility, and even as a community going through and rearing not only our black boys, but our black sisters too.
And Brother Damion, what you're saying there speaks to, you know, when we have the opportunity, when we put the environment around our young folks and give them the tools, their ability to flourish and thrive always comes through. But then the other piece of that is that a gentleman put that program in place, and then what happened? They moved him.
They promoted him.
Right. There you go.
Promoted him.
Right.
There you go.
It's so funny how some of these things happen in all different aspects of life as they relate to us. You know, not just, we talking about social work tonight, but we can talk about corporate America, different stuff in education. Those kind of things happen all the time. So thank you for sharing that. Brother Muhammad, did you have something that you wanted to add to it?
Yeah, you know, I just thought I would say one thing is that, you know, a lot of the brothers were talking about the school system. A lot of the work that we do is out in the community, you know, and I think that in response to your question, I'm a believer in action. So I'm not much, you know, even tonight, I don't necessarily believe that I have to do a lot of talking. Sometimes it's just about doing. And so, you know, what we try to do out here is, you know, if we come up with a concept that we can bring brothers together, bring fathers. I do a lot of work with the men and fathers in our community. And a lot of times they don't even know that I'm doing my social work on them. They think they're just being a part of something. You know, people want to be a part of something positive all the time. And so I'll just tap brothers in our community and we'll do a number of things. And I'm a believer that, you know, sometimes you got to show people instead of tell them. And so you allow the men to do it themselves. And before you know it, we make the change because people want to be a part of the thing that we're showing them. And so I'll just leave it at that.
Brilliant. Respect.
Yeah, great stuff. Brother Holmes, you threw something in the chat there. Talk on that a little bit.
No, I just want to lift up that in our code of ethics, it says that we are to create our own institutions. We gotta be very clear, and I believe everyone on this conversation is we have to create our own. We cannot expect these institutions to raise critical consciousness with our own children. That's what in the work I'm doing in Baltimore. I as well, I partner up with another brother. We create Reflection of Kings, media youth program for Black boys, where we teach Black boys how to use their voice using podcasts and video. And we talk about the issues that's impacting them in the context of their community, and we engage them with other Black men making a positive impact in the community. It won't happen in the school systems. It won't happen in these large institutions. We have to create our own institutions if we want to see the change we want. They never have. If we look at our history and we remind ourselves, there hasn't been a point of time in history where white folks and white supremacy validated who we are and lifted up who we are. It's going to require us to do so. And it starts with some of the brothers that have already talked to. Brother Muhammad, Dr. Butler have already mentioned before, creating our own institutions within our community. And as Baba Olufemi said that it doesn't matter the numbers. If you get 12 boys off the block for a matter of 5-8 hours on a Saturday, then you done did something. And you got to figure out, okay, cool. If I did this for a straight year, I got to figure out how to get 5, 7, 8 more next year. So just being creative, just thinking small, just like that. I just need a handful of brothers to give them my time and my knowledge and my wisdom, and have them collaborate with other brothers to do the same for a few hours on a matter of Saturday. It's not going to happen in a school setting. They're not going to, literally, they're fighting things such as critical race theory. And this is actually a national argument right here. So they don't want our history. They don't want to teach our theories and our practices. But we come from a long line of school of thought that's been going in Black thought for quite some time. It's nothing new. Yes, I can argue for centuries. So we need to use our practices and implement our practices in our institutions and our community.
You said a word there, brother. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And that's really what I was trying to get to, is that I think that, and you all touched on it, is that we have to be dependent upon us, because the system across the board, the system of white supremacy has never been about us, other than using us as a commodity, simply putting us in a place of work and being something that can draw in money in one way or another. That's what we've been about, in the system. So, man, we are already over our time. We were supposed to stop hard at 7:45, but we got a little late start today. So what we do every week is we end it with two things. Number one, we ask about you all's habits, rituals, and disciplines that you do on a daily basis that keep you moving forward. The reason that we want to do that is that any of our young folks that are listening in that haven't created any habits, rituals, or disciplines that they're doing to help them move forward in this life, maybe they pick something up from one of our panelists, some nugget that they say, hey, I can do that. I can do, I can get up and do some meditation in the morning, whatever it is. So we asked that question. And the other thing is, we have a thing that we end this with. It's called a link in this chain, and we'll get to that as well. So first, I'm going to move it around and ask you all what your habits, rituals, and disciplines are that you do on a daily basis that keep you moving forward and keep you doing this work that you do every day. Brother Montrell, I'll start with you.
So my day pretty much starts at 4:45. I have dedicated that time to get up and take my butt to the gym. I noticed a change in how I function throughout the day when I go to the gym, and because I'm so busy throughout the day, I try to go early in the morning. And so going to the gym has kept my blood pressure down, which historically with Black people, we know how hypertension is. It's increased my mood, so I'm not as, sluggish. And just overall, it's kept me in a very healthy state. On top of that, I watch what I put in my body. I don't eat pork. I don't eat red meat. I'm borderline vegan at this point. And so yeah, those are two main things. And then I pray. That's critical for me at this point. So even before I get up and head to the gym, before I step out of the bed, I make sure to at least, wake up in the morning and say, thank you, Holy Spirit, for another day. And then kind of go from there.
You're on mute, bro. You're on mute.
Gotcha, my fault. That's great stuff, Brother Montrell. Being grateful first thing in the morning, waking up and thanking the Creator is essential, I think. I agree with you on that. Dr. Butler, how about you? Habits, rituals, and disciplines.
Yeah, so I think early on in my life, I was all over the place with my life. I think just because, growing up in the streets, there was no such thing as daytime and nighttime. So I really learned to discipline myself with my time. I'm very, very strict with how I spend my time, my 24 hours. So everything for me has to be planned out. I don't go to bed unless I know what I'm going to do the next day. I try to steer clear of people who time wasters and time stealers, in particular, if they're not vision oriented, because I wasted a lot of my time early on in my life, so I understand how detrimental that can be. I'm a pastor as well, so I'm a man of prayer. I pray throughout the day, in particular in the morning. I'm like, Brother Montrell, I can't start my day without prayer. And I never, there's a bunch of other things, but I never go into another day if I hadn't impacted somebody else's life. And that might just be me picking up the phone or texting them, just because I've encountered so many people who was like, man, you don't know what I was getting ready to do. You call me, you text me. So I don't ever go into another day unless I reached out and touch somebody else's life. And that's my sense of fulfillment. So in a nutshell, though, and I don't watch television as well. I'm an avid reader. If it's in the news, I can just check it on my phone and stuff like that. But I hadn't found too much value for me in watching television. So those are some of the things I do.
That's great stuff, man. And that calling somebody, reaching out to somebody every day. That somebody on here before, we had a panelist that said the same thing. And I started doing that. And you're so right. You never know. Inevitably, whoever that person is that you call, you've done something to brighten their day, or you caught them in a down moment, and it just changes the trajectory of their day. So, and it makes you feel good and empowered as well. So I appreciate that one, brother. Brother Holmes, how about you? Habits, rituals, and disciplines.
I would say definitely being goal-oriented, and having imagination has done wonders for my life. We don't encourage enough of our young brothers and sisters to dream and to have an imagination and believe. And believing in yourself can be a scary thing, but believing and going into deep reflection on a day-to-day basis, it has been paramount for me and what works for me. But that's what keeps me going on a daily basis, just understanding what's at stake, understanding where I gotta serve. I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm a man of my community. So just keeping that in the forefront of my mind every day.
Love that, man. Love that. Dream big and believe, more importantly, because sometimes people dream, but they don't believe in their dream. So believing, and you can be amazed by what can happen from there, man, especially our young folks. So thank you for that. I appreciate you, brother. Brother Muhammad, how about you? Habits, rituals, and disciplines.
I created a deck of cards that have positive words on them. So right before the pandemic, I took out some index cards and I started writing just little motivational things on the cards. And every day I basically go through that deck and just to give myself a little boost up, keep myself in a positive mindset. So when I go out into the world, I can be at my best. I think that's the one thing that that's a habit. I've made it a habit for myself. And I also pray and those type of things. But I think that my deck is my thing.
Affirmation, brother. I'm with you, man. Those words of affirmation, that's that I need that daily. So I appreciate that. That's a good wisdom tip right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brother Damion, how about you? Habits, rituals, and disciplines.
Well, first and foremost, I get on my knees and I pray every morning. I pray every morning that I got a fresh breath of life. I pray every morning that, I get a chance and opportunity to elicit and impact some change. So that's the one thing I always do. I always give it up to the Creator. So that's one thing I do. And then I take a time to just meditate and reflect. I just reflect on the struggle. I just think about my family history and how long we come from, and just where, the line and just how far we come from in just this struggle. But yet we still have so much and so much that we need to do. I just reflect on my ancestors. I reflect on my grandfather. I reflect on my great uncle, who was the first person I seen sign his name with an X, couldn't read and write, which I thought at 6 or 7 years old was crazy, because you just don't visualize that now. But this is how, we're not that far removed from that. So I just think about that and how far that we come, but yet we still have a ways to go. We have a ways to go in our community. We have a ways to go and what we're trying to do and to promote this ideology and promote, education, and not just any education, but a real education. Because you get an education, but like the brother Dr. Carter G. Woodson said, you can have a miseducation that does more harm than good. So I just think about that and what we need to do, but also, take solace in the fact that we have come a long way and just continue to do this work to honor just, my ancestors and the legacy that, brothers are fighting for. And what I just take encouragement from and what I do take pride in is being on this call with so many impactful brothers, so many dedicated brothers, so many innovative brothers who are basically doing their thing in and outside the system. And that's what drives the work that I want to do. And I idolize every one of these brothers on this call. And I'm just not saying that. I'm saying that truthfully and honestly out of love and out of respect.
Love that, man. Love that. Good stuff. Thank you so much. Appreciate you, Brother Damion. Last but not least, Baba Olufemi, habits, rituals, and disciplines.
Yeah, brothers. When I get up in the morning, I'm a priest or a shrine worker, man. So I go down and I greet my shrines, every day. I greet my ancestral shrine first with all of the members of the Davis clan, the Williams clan, the Mixons clan, the Carrington clan, and it's thanking them for just doing the work for allowing me to be here. Then I go and greet my other shrines, and at the head of my major shrine in my house, Nana Surgery, I have a picture of two very important men that inspired me and trained me, the late great Nana Aji Akoto and Nana Hannibal Afrique. And these men were powerful brothers. They were nation builders, and just that spark of warriorhood and eldership is what I needed, to help me get to where I am right now. And the second thing I do is I go to the gym about 3-4 days a week. I'll be 55 in November, but I like cracking them irons. That helps me to relax, get my head straight, and I'm gonna keep cracking them until I can't do it no more. And the third thing is that I do a lot of cooking, man. So I do all the cooking in my house, and that's relaxing. I like being on the grill, grilling. Have that little 5-alarm fire going on, in the backyard. Number 4, I like listening to music. So Earth, Wind, and Fire inspired me, man. So I can listen to Maurice White and the Elements all day long, brother. I was a Cameo freak, SOS band. I was a funketeer, back in the late 70s, early 80s, brothers. And the last thing that I like to do, man, is just to, when I have the time, just to read, like Brother Butler was saying, just to stay connected to the work of Kobe Cambone. Damion was talking about Amos Wilson, just staying connected to that level of scholarship. And then the very last thing is that I like being around my family, my extended family here in Richmond. And I haven't been able to do that, because of the pandemic. But, just making sure I go into the backyard barbecues and going to, weddings and things that happen. Family transitionary events. I like being in those things and being with my family. So that's what I do, man. Try to stay on top of my chops, brother.
That's good stuff, brother. And I love that, touching on the Earth, Wind, and Fire, man. I'm a big music and cook myself, so I love both of those things, man. Great stuff. I'm going to tell you all this. This topic, I think we just touched the surface this evening, right? And here on Black Man Lab, when we have a really good topic, we'll repeat it. And because we do this every Monday, so sometimes we need to come back to a topic, and this, I think, is one of them. And so we'll call on y'all. I'm glad we got all you all's information. We'll call on y'all to see if we can get you back on at a future session. I don't know whether it'll be virtual or in person or how we're going to do it going forward. We know we're going to be back in person in July. We know that for sure. So we want to have you all in the space in some form or fashion again to talk about this topic because it's that important. One of the things that we do every week to end out these sessions is there was with the organization of NCOBRA, there's a Queen Mother Njeri Ghani, and she would end every session with what she would call a link in this chain, where everybody would link their arms up together and say, I'm a link in this chain. And we at Black Men Lab have adopted that tradition. And when we're in person, the whole room of the 250 men will link arms together, and then we'll repeat what we're going to do here tonight. So I'd ask you guys if you could act like we're linking arms here on the screen, and then just repeat after me. I'm a link in this chain.
I'm a link in this chain.
I'm a link in this chain.
And it won't break here.
And it won't break here.
It won't break here.
I'm a link in this chain.
I'm a link in
this chain.
And it won't break here.
And
it won't break here.
We are links in this chain.
We are links in this chain.
And we won't break here.
And we won't
break here.
Ashe.
Brothers,
thank you again. We so appreciate you bringing on. We so, more importantly, appreciate the work that you are doing in our communities, raise up our young Black men and our Black families in general. So we truly appreciate the work that you're doing, and know that we see you. We see you and we love you, and we want to be part of this work with you. So we will stay in tune and in touch, and feel free to be part of the Black Men Lab universe and check in with us, and we'll do the same with you guys. And anytime that we can help you all, we're here to do it as well. So thank you.
Appreciate it, brothers. Love you guys, man.
Right,
All right, appreciate you, brother.
Keep doing the work, brothers.
Keep doing the work. That's all we got to do. Keep doing the work.
Every time we speak, I feel this melody telling me my black dreams are safe.